For today's agenda, we will be looking at what Puppet is, why people use Puppet, the pricing model, the architecture and community around Puppet, and we'll discuss Puppet Forge. We will look at Puppet DSL, and then we'll have a demo of how to set up Puppet. Now let's look at what Puppet is. Puppet is basically a configuration management tool. When we talk about configuration management in terms of servers, when you have a lot of them in a data center or in an in-house setup, you will want to keep your servers in a particular state. Now, when you have 10 servers, it's easy to do that using a script or going into each of those servers manually. But then when you have a lot of servers, say more than 50 or 100, it's not possible to do that manually. In those scenarios, a configuration management tool comes to the rescue. The configuration management tool is a tool which either runs in a client mode or a client-server mode, and it's got some configuration language wherein you specify what your state of the system would be. Now let's take an example of a simple web server. Let's say you're running 100 web servers. So essentially what a configuration management tool would do is it would take an input from you, and that input could be a file that has code in it. In that code, you will define how the website will be installed and running. You'll feed that into your configuration management tool. The configuration management tool will then take that as an input. It will process it and execute that code on all 100 servers to make sure that the web server is installed and running. Now, in this case, the configuration management tool will run continuously or in specific intervals, either in the client-server mode or the solo mode. It will not contact the server. And it will make sure that the state you have specified in your code is maintained. Now, in addition to managing server configuration, it is also used by a lot of people in deployments. People use Puppet as a deployment tool in their infrastructure because they don't want to use two tools, one for configuration management and the other for deployment. So that is the motivation for using Puppet as a deployment tool. People also use Puppet as a provisioning tool. So there is a Puppet Labs AWS module, which is available on GitHub, and that is from Puppet Labs itself. There's a link for that. It helps you to provision instances and other things on Amazon Web Services. Now let's have a look at why Puppet as opposed to another configuration management tool. One of the main reasons for using Puppet is that it has an easy programming language. There's a DSL, which is just like plain English. You don't have to actually learn a programming language. It's just like simple English. It's open source, and though there is an enterprise version as well, the open source version will suffice for most common needs. Now, I've seen the implementation of both versions, and you have the same functionality without the cost. The community around Puppet is very good. It's essentially the Ruby community who initially started using Puppet. And you'll find most of the common issues have already been resolved on Stack Overflow. There's also a good collection of open source modules available. You'll find over 4,600 modules, and Puppet is easy to deploy and manage. So people can easily get Puppet up and running with simple packages which are available for almost every operating system. Now let's have a look at the pricing model for Puppet. The most popular version and the most widely used version is Puppet Open Source. So it's freely available, and there are packages available on app.puppetlabs.com or yum.puppetlabs.com. And these are free to install and free for life. The only downside is you don't get any support and you have to update it manually. The enterprise version is available for a price depending on the size of your organization, and you have to get a quote from Puppet Labs. The enterprise version has extra features, but they're only required for an interface class setup. Looking at the architecture, Puppet is pretty much a client-server architecture. The clients communicate with the Puppet server or SSL. So you need to have self-signed SSL certificates because obviously you're not going to buy certificates for your internal communication. The certificate is signed by the Puppet Server Certificate Authority. So Puppet internally packs a certificate authority, now which you can utilize to sign certificates from the client. So when the initial installation takes place, you have to sign all of your clients. You can set Puppet on auto-signing mode, but that's not really safe. On the client side, you've got the agent running all the Puppet clients and factors. So factor is an information collector that sends information from all the clients to the server. Puppet agent is the agent that communicates continuously with the Puppet server. You can set up an interval for communication of the Puppet agent with the server. On the server side, you've got a lot of things. You've got environments, so you can have multiple environments managed by a single Puppet server. Those are basically defined on a directory layer, and you've got the etc Puppet Labs environments folder where you can define environments. You've got inbuilt certificate authority, which allows you to have a signing authority, which assigns all the certificates of the clients, only after which the clients can talk to the Puppet server. You have manifests, templates, modules, and files, which we will talk about in the next slide. Now basically, the manifest is the actual code which configures the client. The modules are full-fledged bundles, which include manifests, templates, and files. Templates are configuration files which are created on the fly based on the client configuration. So let's say there's an Apache server you want to configure. The apache.coms will be saved as a template inside the module. Then there are files which are static files. Say you want to serve out the index.html as a static file. On your Apache servers, you can store that inside the files folder inside your module. Now let's have a look at the Puppet community. The Puppet community is a rich community of a lot of people. Officially, there is no count. But counting the various channels where people collaborate, there are a little over 2,900 committers to GitHub projects who are directly or indirectly associated with Puppet Labs. There are 4,893 modules on the official Puppet Forge. These include modules from the Puppet Labs and also from open source contributors to GitHub. So that's nearly 5,000 modules of ready-made code available on the Puppet Forge. So before you write any code for Puppet, you can check to see if it's already been written by someone. Now there's a mailing list which has 6,588 participants. Apart from this, on Slack Overflow you have a big tag of Puppet Labs and Puppet, which gives you a list of only Puppet questions. That's a good playground for you to interact with people who are already using Puppet and who are contributing and helping others. Now let's have a look at Puppet Forge. So Puppet Forge is a GitHub client for a repository which is hosted by Puppet Labs. It has almost 5,000 modules of Puppet code. So these are both Puppet Labs and community contributed. The best thing about this is that they're easy to customize. So when you have a requirement for anything you're doing with your infrastructure, you can just grab one of those 5,000 modules, and then you can customize it according to your needs. One of the other benefits is they have built-in tests, so they follow all of the best practices. Now, if you write your own module, you also have to write your own tests, and you have to spend extra time writing best practice code. All of that has been taken care of, and you can just download any one of those and customize it according to your needs, and you're good to go. So that's the benefit you get from such a large community, where people contribute to the modules and the code and share with the community. The Puppet DSL. Puppet DSL is a Puppet domain-specific language. It's the Puppet's primary programming language. It's just like plain English, and you don't really need to be a programmer to write code in it. It's kind of a subchild of Ruby because it approaches and uses is equal to and greater than marks to define things. So it's very easy to learn. You can specify packages that you want to install. You can specify services to be managed. You can do things based on the operating system that you have. So we'll be writing a small Puppet module which will be using this Puppet DSL. We will do that after we install the Puppet server and the client. And then we will write a simple Puppet module to show how to use the Puppet DSL. Let's have a look at the demo we are going to do. So you will be setting up the machines using sudo DNS because we want to have a resolvable DNS. Because only by having a resolvable DNS can we use Puppet, because Puppet uses the SSL certificates. Now we'll be installing the Puppet server and the client. We'll be signing the certificates of the client on the server side. And then we'll proceed with writing an NTP module, which we'll be using for installation of NTP on the client. And then we'll look at the Puppet programming language, or DSL. Now, we are going to look at a demo here. So we will be setting up the machines. We'll set up a sudo DNS locally because Puppet requires a fully qualified domain name in order to run, since there is a certificate communication taking place here. We will be installing the Puppet server, the Puppet client. We'll be signing the certificate, and finally we will write an NTP module and make it run. So now we will be starting a Puppet master and a client. I have two machines here. One is the Puppet master and the second is the Puppet client. The Puppet master has got almost 4 gig of RAM and 4 vCPUs, which I can show you here. Because it's a Ruby on Rails application, it requires a lot of CPU and RAM. For the client, I don't need that much RAM and CPU, so I've allotted 1 gigabyte of RAM and 1 vCPU. I will start both of these machines and find out the IP addresses. Right-click, normal start. Both of these machines are starting up. The Puppet client has started up, and the first thing I'll do is log in using root and Red Hat password, and then I will change the host name. So I'll say vim etc host name. This will open a hostname file in a text editor, which is vim. Then we'll do a dd, which will delete that existing host name. And then I press the I for insert mode, and finally I'll type the Puppet-client, which will be the host name of this machine. I'll save this file by doing escape semicolon WQ exclamation mark. And I'll reboot the machine. Similarly, going to the Puppet master, I'll say root Red Hat. I'll open the hostname file. Say dd, then I'll say Puppet-master. I'll save this file and reboot the machine for the hostname change to take effect. The hostname change does not take effect unless you reboot the machine. Now both of these machines are ready. I'm going to find out the IPs and use the Mac terminal to log into these. So this is 23 and 21. So 23 is my server and 21 is my client. I'll SSH to 23 first. Now, in order for the Puppet Master to be installed, I need a fully qualified domain name here and a fake DNS, which means a fully resolvable DNS name. So if I do host name here, you see my host name is Puppet Master. In order to set up a fake DNS, I need to go to the etc host file, go to the end, then I say IP address, host name local, then space host name. Now, this is one of the techniques which makes the Linux server believe that there's a fully qualified domain name on this machine. I'll save this. Then I do a host name -f. You see it has a fully qualified domain name now. So now we will be downloading the Puppet Labs repository for Ubuntu 16.04, which is Xennial. So I'll say curl -0 https apt.puppetlabs.com /puppetlabs-release -pc1 -xennial.deb. You can see there's a Debian file which has been downloaded here. I will import this using the dpkg command. So I'll say dpkg-i puppetlabs-release -pc1 -xennial.deb. And then I'll say apt-get update, which will update my apt package indexes on this machine. And now I'll install the Puppet server. So I'll say apt-get install puppet server -y. So the Puppet server is now installed, and we will be configuring the memory allocation for the Puppet server. So I'll say etc default Puppet server. So by default, it has only got 2 GB allocated. We'll give it 3 GB because it's JVM. I'll make this 3, and I'll change this to 3 as well. And I'll save this file. I'll make sure the unconfigured firewall allows port 8140, which is the Puppet Lab Puppet server port. The rules have been updated to allow that. I'll now start the Puppet server. So I'll say systemctl start Puppet server. It takes some time because it's a JVM, so it takes a couple of minutes to start the Puppet server. So the Puppet server is now running. I'll also enable it at boot time. So I'll say systemctl enable Puppet server. It will enable at boot time. Now I also need to configure a fully qualified domain name here. So I'll do that by going into the hosts file. I'll go to the end and I'll say 192.168.1.23 and then puppet-server.local and then puppet-server. If I do a hostname -f, put -master.local because the current hostname is puppet-master. So the trick is to have the hostname.local in front of the IP address in the host file. Having a fully qualified domain name now we will go to the client setup. The client setup is almost the same with just a small difference. The package which we need to install on the client is Puppet Agent. So we will go to the client. So you see this has got a host name. Now we also need to set up the fake DNS here. So I'll copy this host name, open the host line, go to the end, write the IP address, and then .local, and then host name again. So this will give me a fully qualified domain name. So when I do a host name, it says puppet-client. When I do a host name -f, it says puppet client local. To install the Puppet agent on this machine, I will need to download the Xenio packages. So I'll say wget https apt.puppetlabs.com/puppetlabs -release -pc1 -xenio.deb. I'll download this, and then I'll say dpkg-i puppetlabs-release -pc1 -xenio.deb. So this is the repository package which I'll be downloading here. And then I'll say apt-get update-y. This will update my apt caches on this machine. And now I'll finally install the Puppet agent. So I'll say apt-get install Puppet agent -y. Now the Puppet agent is here. I'll start the Puppet agent and I'll enable it at boot time. So I'll say system control, start Puppet, then system control, enable Puppet. Now Puppet is enabled. Now we have set up the fully qualified domain name on the client and the server, but each of them should know each other. So we'll have to do a cross-certificate host mapping. So we will be copying the host file entry of the client and adding it to the server. So I'll go to the etc hosts on the server side. Go to the end, paste it there. Okay, and I'll be adding the entry of the master on the client side. Okay, now both of the servers will recognize each other now, because one of them has the host entry of the other. So if I do from the master ping puppet-agent.local, if I ping the agent from the server, -client.local, it is able to ping it. And if I ping the master from the client, if I say ping puppet-master.local, both of them will be able to ping each other. Now the next step would be to create a certificate signing request. So I'll go to to this directory, which is opt puppet labs puppet bin, and I'll say puppet agent -t -server is equal to, and I'll give the fully qualified domain name of the puppet master. Then I'll say -f. When I do this, it will create a certificate signing request, you see. Now, if I go to the server and I do an opt, I'll check and see how many certificates are pending to be signed. You'll see there is a puppet client certificate which is pending to be signed, which is denoted by the absence of a plus sign here. I'll be signing the certificate, so I'll say puppet cert sign and then the name. So puppet-client.local, this will sign the certificates. And when I go to the server on the client side, if I run the puppet agent again, you see it's actually pulling down the catalog. As of now, it has an empty catalog. That says there is nothing. Now we have configured the puppet agent and the master. Now we will be taking a module from Puppet Forge. Puppet Forge is a big collection of open source modules which are free to use. As a first step, we will be using a ready-made module, and that would be a demonstration for how to actually get up and running with a module. So search for Apache module here. This is the Puppet Labs Apache module. I'll be using the Puppet command line, Puppet module install. This is the command for that. But I will make sure I run this command from the Puppet home. So I'll go to the master, I'll go to etc Puppet Labs, code, environments, production. In this, I'll do modules. Now I will run it from the binary which is present at the opt puppet labs bin puppet. And then module install. Puppet labs -Apache, and then this version. So we are specifying the latest version, and I'll hit enter. When I press enter, it starts downloading from the Forge API. So you see the module is downloaded in addition to the dependencies. So there is concat, stdlib, and Apache. So now I'll go to a folder here which is one level up called manifests. So this is the file here, etc Puppet Labs code environments production manifests. So in this there's a file which I'll be creating called site.pp. The site.pp will specify, and this is the main controller of how the infrastructure looks. In the site.pp, I specify that I want puppet-client.local node to have the Apache module included. I'll save this file, and the only thing I need to do now is, since all is set on the server side, I need to go to the client side and run Puppet Agent. It will automatically download the Apache module and compile it, and then make sure the server is in a state. So when I press enter, we see a lot of output. It tries to configure Apache on this machine, and done. Now when I go to the front end of this machine, on this port, I should be able to see Apache's default page. So this is Apache's default page. So the module which we downloaded from the Forge was actually written in a way that Apache would be installed and run at boot time. So that is why it is running here. And that is all we have from the Puppet module. And this concludes the demo. Thanks a lot for your time. Have a nice day.
Hey, want to become an expert in cloud computing? Then subscribe to Simplilearn's channel and click here to watch more such videos. To nerd up and get certified in cloud computing, click here.